North Andover, the first or North Parish of Andover, was host to a multitude of skilled artisans in the 19th century. Among these craftsmen were shoemakers, hatters, wheelwrights, potters, joiners, blacksmiths, and carpenters. Shoemaking was a common trade in the United States in the 19th century. In fact, in 1837, Essex County produced over 100,000 boots and more than 7.5 million shoes, employing over 15,000 men and women. In their shops, men fashioned the sole of the shoe and prepared the leather for the women to sew together and attach to the sole at home. Here are a variety of tools used in shoemaking, including molds, hammers, and boot stretchers. Hats were typically made of animal fur, particularly beaver pelts. Only the short, soft hairs of the beaver were used. These hairs were separated from the longer, glossy hairs using knives. A mold is used to shape the hat and is worked for several hours until it is properly shaped and thickened. Hats were then fitted to the wearer using a wooden block that matched the measurements of the buyer. The hat was then dyed and sealed with glue before the lining was sewn in and the hat was sold. Wheelwrights were carpenters who constructed wheels for wagons. Very specific tools were used for this purpose, including axes, hammers, planes, and augers. The wagon wheel was pieced together with tools such as the wheelwright's reamer and hooked reamer. North Andover was home to several wheelwright shops. Wheelwright and blacksmith Ed Adams had a shop located on Johnson Street. Potters used clay to form cups, pots, plateware, and other household essentials. In North Andover, much of the clay used came from Clay Pit Hill. The wheel and the lathe were two primary tools used by potters. The wheel was intended for larger works and was operated by a laborer, while the lathe was used for small pieces and was operated by the potter's foot. The formed clay was then glazed and baked in a kiln until the clay became solid and watertight. Blacksmiths were crucial members of North Andover. Blacksmiths were artisans who manipulated iron to create just about everything needed in everyday life. Many of the items they created were tools for other professions. Blacksmiths heated the metal until it was red hot and then bent it with tools until it reached the desired shape. Anvils were used in this process to pound out imperfections. Carpentry in the early 19th century required the skillful use of a variety of tools, including axes, saws, hammers, adze, and froes. The use of wood was so prevalent, each branch was called by a different name. Joiners built common household furniture such as chairs, tables, and dressers. The shop you're standing in now was built by Samuel Johnson for his joining business. As you look around the gallery, you will see some of the tools used by joiners of Samuel Johnson's time, such as planes, saws, mauls, and adze. Because nails and screws were expensive during this period, joiners constructed furniture so that each piece could only fit one way and in a specific order. Joiners marked each part of the furniture to indicate where each piece would go. This created tight seals that rarely required a permanent seal. Often wood nails were inserted to ensure longer durability. Joiners used wooden mauls instead of metal hammers to prevent damage to the wood. In addition to joining, Samuel Johnson aspired to be a housewright. It is believed that the shop you are standing in now and the parlor of the cottage were built to display his skills. In North Andover, many of the buildings that still stand today were built in the early 19th century using traditional techniques and tools. A major method of construction was to create tight fits in the materials so that fewer nails would be needed in construction. When building a cabin, carpenters devised a system of notching the intersecting corners of the logs to allow for a watertight seal without the use of nails. Among these notching techniques are the saddle notch, sharp notch, square notch, and dovetail notch. Techniques for building houses gradually improved over time. These improvements in construction were directly influenced by the improvement of tools. Craftsmen of the 19th century used a variety of tools in their work. Many tools had variations specific to different jobs. Axes and adze, for example, came in different sizes and shapes to accomplish different tasks. Froes, planes, saws, hammers, and bitstocks were also commonly used. Axes were essential tools during the period and were used in everyday life. Because these tools were so common, many different types of axes were produced to serve any purpose. The felling axe was used to score trees in preparation for the hewing axe, which were used to shape logs used in the building of houses. These often had handles to one side of the head so that carpenters could make clean strikes on the wood without the danger of hitting themselves. The adze had a sharp blade at a right angle to the handle and was used to smooth out imperfections in wood beams. Swinging this tool across the beam created a smooth surface that was important in construction, especially if the beam, being adze, was to be exposed. Like axes, adze were made in different ways to accommodate different jobs. Hand adze were smaller and were used to shape bowls and even out canoes. Froes were also important during the 19th century and were used to split shingles, lathes, staves, and clapboards. A froe would cut pieces out of a broad axe beam by being hit downward by a froe club. This created even, straight pieces of clapboard to be used in construction. Planes were used by carpenters for finish work, such as trim or staircase railings. Joiners like Samuel Johnson used planes on a daily basis. Many of the planes on display in this shop are similar to the planes he would have used. In the 19th century, there were two main types of saws, open saws and frame saws. The open saw, still used today, had a handle and a blade with sharpened teeth. Frame saws usually required two hands to operate. The blade of the saw was surrounded by a frame, thus giving the tool its name. Like today, hammers used in the 19th century for pounding nails into wood as fasteners. Several different types of hammers were common to this period. The claw hammer is the most basic, and its form dates back to 75 CE. Other types of hammers, like the cobbler's hammer, were used for specific jobs, like shaping the corner of drawers. The bitstock, also known as the brace, was used to drill holes into wood. The tool itself was made from wood, usually oak, and had a loose-fitting button on the top. The button was held while the bitstock was turned. This caused the bit to turn, boring a hole into the wood. Bitstocks have been used for centuries and can be found in art dating back hundreds of years. They usually varied in different parts of the country, but the basic overall function remained the same.